So we see this hypocrisy where the people who are making the biggest demands are the ones who are getting the check. And you know who got left out is that working class guy in Wisconsin or the working class guy in South Carolina. I don't know. I probably, it's not the thing I should say, but I don't know why every working class or middle class guy in this country doesn't have a pitchfork in the back of his car. And when he runs across a banker or a politician, he ought to be after him, because we have stranded them in this purgatory of flat or declining wages. Their kids have to pay a fortune to find a job now in the college world that we're in. I mean, we have destroyed the future of the middle class. I hate to be so negative here. We'll be positive here in a few minutes. And nobody seems to care much. And I think it's part of it is this, like the sales job on ESG.
Hi, I'm Frank Lasee, and I'm here on behalf of the Alliance for Free Citizens. I'm the president of Truth in Energy and Climate. I served in Governor Walker's administration as a state senator in Wisconsin. I've been working on energy and climate issues for years. They're really important, and they're becoming even more important now. We're here with Curtis Loftis, who is the state treasurer of South Carolina. He's taken some actions recently that is pushing back against this ESG. And we're here to talk about that today.
I'm the treasurer of South Carolina, and I went down the ESG rabbit hole 5 or 6 years ago, along with other associated speech and behavior codes from the left. And we've been working diligently since then. BlackRock is kind of at the center of all this. So we focused on them mainly. About 5 years ago, when the portfolio management was up for bid, we had many people want to invest this money because it's a lot of money, and they of course will make a lot. I have a provision that exempts me from any type of procurement. I sign the dotted line. I make these decisions. Well, we got down to the bottom line, about to the end of the competition, to see who was going to manage the money. And it was BlackRock and another firm. And this was as I was learning about ESG and BlackRock's role in it. So BlackRock did not get the work. Federated got the work. And again, that's $41 billion. And those in the finance business know that you make a lot of money investing that much money. And so I think Federated's happy. I know that I'm happy. And that was based on this ESG concern. Since then, we've worked out various instruments that BlackRock had in our different portfolios. And the last little bit of it was $200 million of investments in our college savings plan. I asked, I think it was not even end of August, 1st of September, that be worked out of the portfolio. And that will be gone by the end of the year, which is just a couple months away now. So that'll be all the BlackRock we have. We're looking at other avenues because it's more than just BlackRock. But I wanted to make sure I got one done. I looked at it. I could see how long the time went. I could see what my vendors were saying. So we're more prepared.
Well, and ESG underperforms the market. The ESG funds, according to the Harvard Business Review, Wall Street Journal has written on this as well. They underperform and they charge higher fees. So you get underperformance and higher fees. That's not good for any investment portfolio.
That's right. And as they take our index funds money, which could be at a reasonable rate, they take our proxy votes as well. And they vote those in opposition to what we would want. The people of South Carolina don't want fossil fuel removed from the marketplace, but the way BlackRock and others vote sends us closer to that possibility every time there's a vote. We've watched the Exxon votes, Chevron votes, and others. So we have to be careful about not just the investment itself, but what does the investment mean? What is somebody taking our money and taking that power and converting it to political power? And that's a real problem.
You're absolutely right. That's what's getting lost in this whole discussion about ESG and corporate governance and investing is, what about the regular guy, the regular people? What about the 401ks, the pension holders, people who have invested in the stock market? And, how does this affect them? And I mean, it's a really important question. You're right. People aren't really focusing on it, but you are.
Well, it's interesting. I've been treasurer now for 12 years, something I never thought would happen. I kind of stumbled into office and they pay us so little, it's hard to find somebody of high quality to hope that you can help them get elected, right? So we're supposed to get raises this year, so I might can leave. go back to being retired. But in the 12 years that I've been treasurer, I've been around tremendous sums of money. There's nothing in real life that can prepare you to be a treasurer, because all of a sudden you're in charge of billions of dollars of other people's money. So we get to see a lot of things other people don't see. One of the things you see a lot of is how quickly people like to please rich people. And ESG is like so many of the other speech and behavior codes given to us by the left. It's rolled out there. It's told to us it's for our own good. It's sold by compliant media and hundreds, if not thousands, of 501c3s and government bureaucrats are all working on the same page. And before you know it, it is the law of the land without ever going through Congress.
Without ever getting a vote, without
Yes.
regular people getting involved. I think if you ask regular people, do you want everything you buy to cost more? Because that's really what ESG means. They would say no, and they wouldn't vote for it. And they haven't been able to get their green policies and all this other stuff. The ESG is really a woke dream. It's a leftist dream.
It's the left's political manifesto turned into investment tools, and that we're supposed to accept. And by accepting them, we impose the left's worldview on our financial system, on our citizens. It's reprehensible. It's inconsistent with the legal and fiduciary responsibilities of a treasurer or a pension manager. We almost in every state is about the same, certain different laws, but it comes down to we're supposed to invest for the benefit of the people we serve. And the terms they'd like to use, my fiduciary responsibilities to maximize the profit at a reasonable and prudent rate of risk. And so that's what we do. When you bring in this overlay of a leftist manifesto, you break all of those rules, because you no longer have a fiduciary responsibility, this long-lasting responsibility with your citizens. You're now have a code that's originated and many times and signed at the United Nations or some other global body, brought back here and imposed on us as if it were law. And so some of us are now fighting back, and the more we see of it, the more we are convinced that we just have to try to send it back from whence it came.
Well, I agree with you 100%. For those people who are seeing this, I'd suggest strongly to you to withdraw your money from BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. These are the large, major pushers of this. And we should talk a little bit about what is ESG. A lot of people don't know it. It's got nice buzzwords, and like so many things of the left, who could be against environment, social, and governance? I mean, those sound so nice.
Sometimes I
really
think the left is just fantastic at marketing. But then I remember when you literally own the institutions which all information travels, from media, journalism, Silicon Valley, the education system. You don't have to be great marketers. You could have, as we see now, this is a terrible product. But when all the institutions of power are on the same page and they're parroting the same lines, it works. And I keep going back to the Solzhenitsyn line where he says, don't believe the lie, right? The lie, it could triumph, but just don't let it triumph through me. And we know as investors, if you're a treasurer, if you got to that point in your life, you're smart enough to figure this out. We've got to stop it. ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And of course, a lot of the conversation now is around the environmental part. That's just a part of it. When you look at the social part of it and the governance part of it, what you really look at is a worldview. You can't just even shrink it down and say, well, this is how we invest. It's bigger than that. It is imposing upon corporations how many minorities they will have in their boards and in their corporation. It's imposing how many trucks and cars you can have to effectuate your company's mission. It's where you can work and how you can work. It is so comprehensive that it is almost impossible to discuss it unless you're going to go to a master's class with slides and spend a week doing it. And that's one of the problems.
Curtis, let's break it down a little bit. An example would be a company has an opportunity to move a factory to a different place because it'll be more profitable for the company, for the shareholders. But then they look at it and go, well, this will hurt my ESG score. This will affect the local community. You're supposed to consider them with ESG as well. This will affect my supply chain. This will affect my employees. I should take all that into account and maybe elevate them above the shareholders that I'm supposed to serve. It adds a whole bunch of different dynamics that are non-financial that have really are raised to importance above financial.
Yeah, it breaks that fiduciary responsibility. I owe the citizens. My investment managers owe me, the intermediaries, the broker dealers, the folks the custodian banks, they all owe them. We all owe somebody in this line, not just some moral imperative, but it's settled law. And yet they want to upend that by saying that the stakeholder, and Lord, stakeholders is one of the least well-defined terms you'll ever find, but they want those people to have an equal access. And again, it's just the left imposing its political view. If the right had tried this, I mean, they would have, sent us off to a desert island someplace. They wouldn't have put up with this for 5 minutes. But you go back to what you're saying, and you brought up something that's just now really happening. It's something we knew that would happen. But by imposing ESG on corporations and governments is one thing, right? Because that's the investment policy. But now to keep your investment, your ESG rating, how do you effectuate that? How do you make sure that it didn't go down? Because you don't want to be boycotted by the left. It's effectively what happens if your ESG rate score drops. Certain firms will say, well, we're not going to underwrite your debt, or certain banks say we won't bank you, or if we do, it will have higher fees. But see, that's all part of that part. But what you just mentioned about the community is that now we're seeing when states and counties and cities are getting in line for economic development. The big corporations, I mean, the richest corporations in the world are saying, yes, little county or little state, you can get in line to bid for our business after you do certain things. And those certain things almost always now are lining up with their ESG ratings. So we will bring a chip plant to your state if you give us a green energy grid. So we have to tax our local folks to produce something that may or may not be of lasting value, because who knows about all this stuff, in order to get in line to give $1 billion to a wealthy corporation. So you can see how insidious it is. The knockoff effect is going to reach everybody. Now, what do economic development folks have in common? Their job is to bring the deal. They're not thinking about the philosophical issues involved with this.
Or they're not thinking about the electric rate increases that everyone is going to experience, because contrary to what we're being told, it is very expensive to add part-time wind and solar to an electric grid, build transmission wires, figure out some kind of storage, and then wear out your natural gas and coal plants by turning them off and on to match the part-time nature of wind and solar. These things are expensive, and new investment is expensive. And people don't know, but we haven't increased our electric usage rate in the United States, our electric demand, since 2005. It's been flat this whole time, but yet we're investing lots of money, and our electric rates reflect this. And that's a great example. I know here in my area in Wisconsin, I talked to one of the electric utilities, and they serve the Kohler company. And the Kohler company is pressuring them to give them greener electricity so they can put it into their ESG score, so they can show that we've moved closer to net zero. That's their big game thing here. And it's wildly expensive and not really possible. And this is the pressures that are there. And regular people suffer for it. If you ask them, they'd never vote for it.
And Kohler, you mean the generator folks? The
Kohler
folks
that makes the toilets.
Oh,
Kohler toilets.
This is also happening in the generator world, where the generator companies, and I've forgotten the name of the biggest one because I'm looking at some for my home.
Generac, I think it is.
Yeah, you want those companies because you want those products because you're afraid that you're not going to have enough electricity. If you look at what's happening in Germany and England and other places, they're really panicked about this winter. So as more people buy into this line of products, these same people are saying, oh yeah, but by the way, we want you to provide us with green infrastructure, and we won't want you as our subcontractors to have more minorities on your board. And we don't care that you're a small corporation, it's a family owned, and you've only got 3 brothers, you don't, who else are you going to put on there, right? They don't care about that. So we see this hypocrisy where the people who are making the biggest demands are the ones who are getting the check. And you know who got left out is that working class guy in Wisconsin, or the working class guy in South Carolina. I don't know, I probably, it's not the thing I should say, but I don't know why every working class or middle class guy in this country doesn't have a pitchfork in the back of his car. And when he runs across a banker or a politician, he ought to be after him, because we have stranded them in this purgatory of flat or declining wages. Their kids have to pay a fortune to find a job now in the college world that we're in. I mean, we have destroyed the future of the middle class. I hate to be so negative here. We'll be positive here in a few minutes. And nobody seems to care much. And I think it's part of it is this, like the sales job on ESG.
It's the propaganda ministry of the regular media, and more people are starting to understand that, that it's not true, and they just are selling us propaganda on a regular basis. And ESG is a really great example of that. The greenwashing that companies do, that they claim to be ESG, they claim to be headed towards net zero, when in fact they really aren't. But because they're a leftist company, it's okay, because we have very subjective rules. And that's the other big problem with this as well, is it's very subjective, and it can mean anything. But you brought up stakeholders. That's another part of this. And that started with Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, the WEF, like about 40 years ago. He was writing about it. And stakeholderism is giving each of these ESG priorities, the environment, the community, minorities, the net zero, all our stakeholders elevated to equal or above the shareholders. And in fact, they're saying, well, you really don't need to pay so attention to those shareholders. It's all these other things that are more important.
Exactly. They want to break the trust of the private enterprise and private financial system that we have in this country. They want that fiduciary responsibility to go away. I was privileged, or whatever, however you want to call it, is in a lecture by Kimberly Crenshaw, the law professor who's kind of written the book on shareholder capitalism in America. And you listen to it and you think, I didn't learn any of this in college. I mean, it wasn't like this is a riff off of something. This is just a repudiation of what we believe in. And at the end of the day, all of this wokery, all of this ESG stuff, it's a repudiation of the West. And we're watching in real time a decline so rapid that most people can't understand it. But in my job, you can't see my desk, but I've got a huge desk and it is piled high. We get lots of information. And it is difficult to find a trend that is good in America. And when we had the biggest banks in the world come through here, I asked their head economists and their investment folks, I'll say, like in 6 months, if I wake up and we have the best economy we've had in 20 years, or if we're in a 1929 style depression, which do you think is more likely to happen? And they just shake their heads, say, well, who knows? Now, they're not going to say that in public. But again, it comes back to this ESG. We are enacting the hard left, the radical left, the globalist left. We're enacting their policies in Republican states, in what used to be Republican industries and businesses. And we know that the blue states are going hog wild. We know that even in the red states, our universities and all are teaching all this as if it were settled fact, as if diversity, equity, inclusion was settled law. It can be further from the truth. Or if sustainability, which is the new religion.
What happened to Martin Luther King's statement that man should be known by the content of the character and not the color of their skin? And I believe that 100%, in that we shouldn't have discrimination. And in fact, this is completely reverse discrimination. And, it's really kind of crazy once you start to dig into it. One of the things I'd like to talk about is banking. You mentioned banking. And there's tremendous pressure and all the bad economic news, because I believe they're very much linked, and inflation is very much linked to these things. Is there's huge pressure on banks and big insurance companies not to provide money to the oil industry, oil, natural gas, and coal industry, and not to provide insurance to them. AIG said they're no longer going to insure and work with or give investment funds, because a lot of these big insurance companies have huge wads of money because they're investing to pay off their claims someday, and they won't invest or they won't invest and insure for oil exploration in Alaska.
Yeah, exactly right. I have talked to the group that was kind of the head group and responsible for doing the lobbying for stricter insurance ratings in Europe. They in Europe, it's just common. I think it's probably by law, but it's a common everyday occurrence that they price in their idea of global warming catastrophe 50 years out. So when you look at Texas and Florida and you see where hardly anybody can insure their state, their homes, one of the reasons is that over the last 5 years, that same theory has come in here. And like every other association, well, I should say every, but 99% of them, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners is a left-wing group. And they actually do a whole lot more work than people think. They manage a lot of the states. So all of these groups, all of these associations that we used to rely on have succumbed to the ESG and other speech codes. So our insurance problem is one, it's a part we for 50 or 100 years been building right on the water. So, that was never a good idea. And why it continues, I don't know. But a lot of it is manufactured. It's like by not investing in energy, especially fossil fuels, then it costs more and we have less of it. So I am terribly concerned about this winter. I've been looking for about 5 years for the contagion that really sets off some cataclysmic financial crisis. We've had some bad times over the last 20 years or 30 years, but nothing like I think could come out of this winter. And if it does, it will be because of the thing you just mentioned, ESG, targeted fossil fuels, among other things, and it has had a detrimental effect. And even though we are a rich country with fuels, we're not tapping them. Britain, their bills have already, their electric bills or power bills have already doubled for the average consumer, and they're about to double again. This is all in a 6-month period. And they're sitting on $1 trillion of natural gas that they're not going to pump.
Right here at home, New Hampshire electric bills in October doubled for regular people and tripled for businesses. I have proof and pictures of electric bills from a business that went from $1,600 a month to $4,800 a month in 1 month. All of the New England ISO customers, that doesn't include New York, but all the rest of New England, are going to see similar doubling and tripling of their electric rates over the next year because of green policies that fit in with its ESG. They don't want to build any more pipelines for natural gas from Pennsylvania because it's we're going green, we're going to have enough, but we don't have enough right now. So they're forced to buy LNG on the world market at 7 to 10 times the rates we're paying here in America. 7 to 10 times. So this is our future unless we get a hold on it, folks. And this is the problem because the propaganda media is not letting the word get out to regular folks. So they vote these crazy policies out of office. And it's a real problem. It's going to continue to grow here as well.
And the states can manage this. The red states especially, we have a lot of influence that we just don't use. I'm in South Carolina. We have supermajorities in the House and the Senate, and very little has been done on any of these kinds of things. If I go to the university's website, you see the speech and behavior codes at all of our publicly funded institutions are not very dissimilar to, say, Columbia or Berkeley. We've got to stand back. We don't have to, you can't eat, you don't have to eat an elephant all at once. You eat it, bite by bite. We've got to stand back and look at this because this is not normal. This is not the left wins the election and they go a few degrees to the right, and then we win an election and we go a few degrees back. That's not what this is about. This is about totality. They don't ever expect to leave office. And the bureaucracy that is being assembled in Washington, D.C. is beyond belief. For 2 years, I've been asking governors and senators and politicians from all sorts of states and corporate leaders, have you read President Biden's executive orders? I've never met anybody that read more than one. And that was it. And I've asked hundreds, if not thousands of people in speeches. If you read those orders, you see the direction of the world. And I understand that presidential orders, they don't live past this president's term. But a new president's got to come and counteract that. We can't count on Republican officials to do that. If you read those, you see how deeply ingrained every single action of the federal government is. And it's all in tune with the ESG. ESG just happens to be a great, speech and behavior code imposed on us that shows us what they're doing. You take that and put it at transportation, defense, aviation, Health and Human Services. That's going on everywhere. And what these codes, what these orders say effectively is we have an all of government approach. And the number one goal is diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability.
Well, and sustainability is the idea of ending fossil fuels, which provide 80% of our energy in the United States, 84% of the world's energy. We use an unbelievable amount. The United States uses 20 million barrels of oil a day, 20% of the 100 million used every day, 36 billion barrels of oil we are using annually, 8.5 billion tons of coal, half of which the Chinese burn, and they're going to use even more of it in the future, 135 trillion cubic feet, and we produce more of that and we export it here. Those are all American jobs. They want to end this. And I liken it to no smart person would change their diet and not line up a new food supply first. And what they do is it's completely upside down and backwards. They want to choke off the food because fuel and energy is the fuel for the economy that gives us the great lives we can enjoy here in the United States. And they want to choke that off without lining up the others. And the other is really expensive. So they want to make our food supply, our energy supply, super expensive. So the alternative doesn't seem so bad because it is really bad.
They know exactly what they're doing. I've spent 5 years ago, I went down this rabbit hole. And, when you're ahead of the curve, people always say, oh, that's a great place to be. It's a terrible place to be. When I was in business, it was a good thing because I could control that. But here, unless you've got unless you're Donald Trump, so what? You just sit and it's like watching a slow motion car wreck. Well, they want this, they call it dislocation. They want this dislocation. They want people to be cold so that they'll buy into the government line. It's like COVID. They want you to stay home. They want you not to go out and see people because it gives them greater control. And this is, you can just read their documents. I've traveled to London, to LA, to Boston, to San Diego a couple times, Washington, D.C., New York, Oxford, England, twice, I think it was, to meet with people who understand this far better than I do, meet with world-class experts. Also, I traveled to London once just for an Extinction Rebellion protest. I got in it, I was listening, I was talking to people. I've always been fascinated with these mass movements. If you remember Code Pink, when President Bush, the young President Bush was president.
Code Pink was Curtis, the Extinction Rebellion. What do they want?
They want the end of the West. They want the end of free enterprise. And I can't tell you how many college professors and other people are into that, because end of free enterprise doesn't mean the end of rich people. It just means they have all the money.
Well, and this is, let's sum it up here, but I think you came on a great sum up. It is about ending capitalism, freedom, and the West. And what are the alternatives? You've got the poor African and the poor Asian countries. You've got the totalitarian tyranny of China and Russia. And that's about it. That's about it. And ESG will destroy capitalism as we know it.
Exactly. And the states and the state legislators have to act. What I found was the more I act in the interest of working class and middle class, the higher my vote totals become. It is not, people are afraid to act. The real story of the last 25 years is not that the bold left took over. They told us what we're doing. You could read their books, listen to their podcasts. They tell you everything you want to know. The real story is the cowardice of the right. Our leaders have focused on a couple little issues where they can know they can, they're not little issues, guns and abortion. I'm with the party on both of those. I'm conservative on both those issues. But other than that, they've let the rest of it go because they can raise money and stay in power with those. We need state legislators to say, I'm going to fight this. And there are groups out there that can help them. There's a lot of literature out there. We've got to be able to know how to stem the tide. As states, we have to stop funding diversity offices because those are nothing but political commissars for the left. If you look at how they hire, you have to hire somebody from the left. ESG, that's part of the governance. All of this stuff is there for you to read. I was on the phone with the Attorney General of South Carolina today, asking him about the collusion that's involved and has he looked into it and what can I do to help? He's very interested in it. We've got to, wouldn't it be great if every red state asked their Attorney General to look into ESG and determine whether the law has been broken or civil action can be taken because of the collusion that's been involved to break the fiduciary responsibilities between
or bring lawsuits against the companies for greenwashing, yes, claiming that they are net zero when they're not, just for a market advantage, and that is blatantly illegal. And they could raise a lot of money to help regular people in our states. As a former Republican state senator from Wisconsin, I believe Republicans should be looking out for the regular people, and we should put regular people first. And we're seeing it, and that's how we can win even greater numbers at the ballot box, because it's really important to take care of the regular people, because we are under a major threat right now, and it's national security. We're getting a woke military, a military that wants to decarbonize. How do you run a tank or an airplane on electricity? Where would you charge it up in a battlefield? I mean, this stuff is really, really goofy, and the Chinese and the Russians don't care. We are becoming unsafe, unstable, very expensive energy policy, and that's causing inflation everywhere, particularly food, because energy and fertilizer, which are made from fossil fuels, are major inputs for our food supply. So food and energy are going up and up and up, and it's going to cause inflation across everything. It's not just poor money policy in Washington. It's energy policy that is now killing us as well. We need to push back.
And that instability is where the globalists really thrive with COVID and food issues, food instability and energy instability. That's where they thrive. That's where they take their power. I think that we have a chance to stop this. We have to act, and we have to act now. And I appreciate your efforts and what y'all are doing. One thing we have to also realize, it's not going to be people who look necessarily like me and you who stop all this. I found surprisingly number of people who are in that kind of middle left. Lots of people in the Black and Hispanic community don't like any of this, but we haven't given them a voice. If you look at some of the most important speakers and writers and thinkers about kind of the woke issues in general, a lot of them are Black, they're gay, many of them are atheists, but who have more respect for Christianity than the Christians do. So we've got to have that, the big tent we talk about, we've got to include those people. I had a Black friend tell me the other day, this wokery is the end of the Black culture. And he loves his culture. And
Curtis, he's absolutely correct. They want to end the culture we have in this great country. And it is a full frontal assault right now, as you mentioned, the federal government, these big corporations, they're pushing everywhere, and we need to push back, and regular people need to understand this, and state legislators need to protect middle-class families and poor families from all of this terrible stuff that is ESG is just one part of many. And they need to vote accordingly, and they need to and I think it's a winning message. Taking care of regular people and making their lives better and their kids' lives better in 10 and 20 and 30 years is a winning message in November and beyond. And it's the right thing to do. And it's good for our country.
Well, David Beasley, who's former governor of South Carolina, he now runs the food program for the UN. When COVID came along, he said that America's slowdown sent hundreds of millions of people into the lowest category of poverty. I forgot, destitute poverty, maybe what they call that. It's less than $1 a day. It means that your sole goal for that day is to find food for your family. We sent those people there. The left is not bothered by that. When America, the old saying, when America catches has a sneeze, the world catches a cough. As they flip us from a free country where we were the engine of democracy and the economic engine of the world, as that stops, people are going to die. I mean, not like 3 people someplace, hundreds of millions of people will have their life cut short and die because of the do-gooders here can't see any further than, I got to save the planet, which of course they're not.
And the planet doesn't need saving.
Yeah. So again, I appreciate your work. I implore the state legislators, you have to do it. Nobody else is going to do it. I'm in the executive branch. The executive branches across the country, with a few exceptions, just don't act. You know, when we act, it's like, hey, the treasurer did something, or the AG or the governor or something. When the General Assembly act, you can get together coalitions. And there are lots of people across the street here with the General Assembly here that wouldn't vote on a lot of things together, but they don't want a poor America. They don't want their culture decimated. And we've got to take that issue to them. The fight really is at the General Assembly, because, you know, Washington, I don't ever look at Washington for anything.
Curtis, we should wrap this up, but I think you've made the great point that state legislators across the country and legislatures need to get active in these issues. They need to push back. They need to protect their people. They need to protect the American way of life, the prosperity that we've earned here, and it helps the rest of the world too. It helps the environment. Only wealthy countries can pay attention to the environment, because those poor people are scrambling and cutting down wood and burning dung to make the ends meet, and freezing because they don't have enough energy. And there's plenty of energy in the world for all of us. There are plenty of fossil fuels, and we need to protect that in our way of life, and state legislatures must act.